What's up, y'all? We are in week 2 of our series called What If, and this is a vision series. This is a series where we're saying, all right, maybe this is you, maybe this is your reality, but all of us at some point in life have a vision or a dream that God will put on our hearts. And so we've been asking, we started this last week, and we're going to continue to ask, what does it look like for us to move into what could be or what should be? And so maybe you're in a season where you're asking that right now. Maybe you've had seasons like that in the past. You certainly, I'm sure, will in the future. And so we're just trying to figure out, what does it look like for us to chase after God-sized dreams when he places them on our hearts? And as a backdrop for this series, we've been getting to know this guy named Nehemiah. I want to catch you up a little bit so that we're all on level ground. If you missed last week, I don't want to just assume you know this 2,700-year-old character. And so let me sort of catch you up. See, Nehemiah is a Jew. And the Jewish people, their story is one that's a lot of pushing God away, and then he shows mercy and grace, because of course the Jews are God's people. And so then he'll show mercy and bring them back, and they'll push them away again. And this goes on throughout pretty much the entire Bible, throughout the Old Testament certainly, and you and I have a similar relationship with God as well. He's merciful, he's gracious, he's loving, he's a good God. But there are moments, if you read through the Old Testament, where you see God seems maybe wrathful or maybe a little bit angry. And one of the things that we have to remember is that often there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of God showing this mercy and this grace and this forgiveness and just sort of bending over backwards and doing whatever he can and sort of just being like kicked in the face over and over by his people before finally he'll say, okay, we got to play hardball here. I need to get your attention somehow. And so there's this moment where this southern region of Israel called Judah, these are God's people again, where it is overthrown by a pagan empire called Babylon. Babylonians come in and they overthrow it, led by Nebuchadnezzar. They take the Jews out of Jerusalem and out of Judah and out of their territory, out of their homeland, on this exile into Babylon, where they're oppressed and not having their best lives now, okay? And then, of course, as things go, though, another power, world power, comes in, the Persians, and they overthrow the Babylonians. And so now the Persians are looking around and they're saying, we don't really have any use for these Jews. We could just go ahead and send them back. And so that's what they do. If you read through the book of Ezra, it's the story of kind of the first 2 waves of God's people, Jewish people, going back into Judah, back to Jerusalem to rebuild Jerusalem the best that they can. But it's slow going, and it's not going well, that whole rebuilding thing. And so one day, again, we meet this guy Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah is a Jew, but Nehemiah was not in that group of Jews who went back to Jerusalem to rebuild. He's been hanging out with the king of Persia, Artaxerxes. Actually, he's his cupbearer. And so Nehemiah has this role of trust and of some influence with the king. He has this role of some affluence. But I want to be very intentional in saying this. Nehemiah is not some sort of prophet. He's not some sort of like mystic or teacher or politician. He's not some guy with like a prince or a king. He's just a normal guy with a job working there with the king. And so one day, though, Nehemiah, there with the king, has a group of buddies who travel back from Judah, and they say, hey, listen, Nehemiah, you need to know what's going on. He asks them, actually, how are things back in Jerusalem? They say, not so great. And as they're describing the situation, as they're describing the reality back in Jerusalem, his heart just breaks. Nehemiah's heart breaks. They say, Nehemiah, the city walls surrounding Jerusalem are still just broken to pieces, and the gates are in ashes, and it's not a good thing. And so here's why this is particularly challenging and convicting for Nehemiah, because, well, twofold. Number one, let's remember, these are his people. Not that he's the ruler over, but these are his ancestors. This is his heritage. He is a Jew. Jerusalem is the holy city, God's holy city. And so he's looking at it and he's saying, oh gosh, this is so heartbreaking. These are my people, and this is their reality. This is what it's come to. But then, just logistically speaking, Let's remember that this is a time, 2,700 years ago, where empires, tribes, different nations are constantly just battling over territory and fighting for sometimes valid reasons, sometimes just because that's what you did. And so Nehemiah recognizes here's Jerusalem with no line of defense, no wall protecting it, women and children who are just exposed to whoever wants to come in and harm them. And so it's in this heartbreak for Nehemiah that a vision is born. And that vision is to go and to rebuild the city walls, to rebuild Jerusalem. It's kind of the long-term thing. And so he starts to think through this and process through this. And last week we talked about really how the only thing standing in his way of this what is turning into a what could be or what should be, this reality becoming becoming reality, this vision taking place, the only thing really standing in his way is the king, King Artaxerxes. Because again, let's think about this. He could approach the king, he could share his vision, and easily, the king who has no emotional tie, no investment to Jerusalem, no reason that he would, feel some strong tug to go and help Nehemiah in this vision, the king could easily just say, nope, we're not going to do it. No, Nehemiah, I'm not worried about it. No, I trust you here. You're my cupbearer. I just want you to stay in this role. All of this could take place. All of this could be a reality. And so what Nehemiah does in this moment between the conviction and the stirring and the heartbreak, birthing this vision, and then the moment where he goes and he approaches the king, he takes advantage of this opportunity. He's working sort of behind the scenes. And more specifically, and here's what we're going to get into today, he's doing two things. He's praying and he's planning. And so again, I don't know what your life is like. I don't know what vision God may or may not be laying on your heart. I don't know what dream you're considering pursuing. I don't know any of that, obviously, for you in your state. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever had these moments where a vision or a dream is birthed, and you know it's not something that just with the snap of the finger it's going to happen overnight? And then let's be honest, I want you to think, is there a thing in your life that you felt like you were supposed to do, but you knew it wasn't just going to happen overnight? You knew it wasn't tomorrow, but it's what could be, or it's what should be, and then this happens, right? In the time that it takes to graduate, or the time that it takes to pay off the debt so that you can then take the real step of faith, or the time that it takes to do whatever has to happen to accomplish or to get that lift off with that vision, like 3 months go by, 6 months go by, a year goes by, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And all of a sudden, this is what seems to happen. The vision dies. The dream dies. Again, you had this moment where you said, this is what is, but this is what could be. This is what should be. This is where I should go. This is where I should be working. And this is it. But there's this thing that has to happen in order for you to then get that initial, and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen overnight, snap of fingers. And this is where that dream dies. And so I can't help but think, I don't know how long a span of time it was for Nehemiah. Between the moment when his vision was birthed and the moment where he took advantage of this opportunity and spoke to his king and said, hey, I think I'm supposed to do this thing. I don't know how long, whether it was 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or a year. I don't know how long, but here's what I know. Nehemiah gives us a plan on how to keep that vision alive. And again, I just think it's these two things. See, the most surefire way to sustain a dream is praying and planning. I'll say it again. The most surefire way to sustain a dream in your life, it's praying and planning. See, here's why I know this. We look at Nehemiah's life and we see this. We see that if you were to go back and read Nehemiah chapter 1, the first 4 verses just kind of setting up the story. His buddies come and visit. Things aren't so great back in Jerusalem, and Nehemiah's heartbroken. But then verses 5 all the way through the end of chapter 1, here's what Nehemiah's doing. Praying. God, would you give me the opportunity? God, would you help me to be courageous? God, when I get this chance to speak to the king, would you let him have favor over me? God, would you allow me to speak eloquently? Would I be prepared? God, would you just put all of this? God, I want to do this right. And he's just praying, and he's praying, and he's praying. And then we also know this, he's planning. And here's why we know this. Again, I'll sort of go back to last week. There's this moment, he goes, he takes the wine to the king or whatever, and he goes to the king, and the king looks at him and he says, "Why are you so sad?" And Nehemiah says, "Well, it was a really tough thing. The Browns were supposed to win. They were favored. It was really hard, and then they lost." No, he goes, "Listen, this is my situation. My people back in Jerusalem, this is what's happening. And it breaks my heart. And I want to go and I want to do something about it." And the king sort of perks up. And the king says, "Okay, Nehemiah, I think I'm on board." And he actually goes so far as to say, "Okay, what do you need from me?" And Nehemiah, here's what he does. Look at this. Verses 7 and 8. Chapter 2. It says, "I also said to him," so Nehemiah, given the opportunity now, he says, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted me my request." This is kind of crazy, okay? So again, let's understand. Nehemiah has this moment with the king. He's been praying for it. "God, I pray that I'll have this opportunity. I pray that when I do, that I'll press in, that I'll be wise, that he'll hear my heart, that the king will have favor on me because you have given him that favor to put it on me. And God, I just pray that all this will happen. But God, when this happens, I want to be prepared." And so he's praying, and then it happens. And the king says, "Nehemiah, what's going on?" He shares with them, "Here's my heart." And the king says, "Okay, do you need anything? How long are you going to be gone?" And Nehemiah immediately doesn't sort of back out of the room and say, "Let me just go back to the drawing board. I'll think about it." No, he knows when this moment comes, I have to be wise and I have to be prepared. And so he begins to just unveil all this. And here's why this is so crazy is, again, Artaxerxes doesn't have this big tie to Jerusalem. He's not deeply emotionally invested. This is just another territory that they conquered, more land they're taking. He has no heartstrings that are being tugged at. But Nehemiah, he doesn't care because he has a vision. And he's been praying and he's been planning. So he says this. He says, "Hey, not only do I want your blessing, King Artaxerxes, but also would you do this for me? Would you provide me some letters so that I can have safe travel? Because there's a lot of shady people on this journey. It's a 4-month trek by foot all the way back to Jerusalem. Could you just give me safe passage? And so give me some letters. If anyone messes with me, they're messing with you. And not only that, but could you do this? So-and-so over there that does the timber and oversees all the wood and all that stuff. I'm going to need some of that to rebuild the city gates and to rebuild this wall. And honestly, I need a house. I got to build a house. I mean, Jerusalem's in shambles. Could you provide me all?" So now he's like putting this big financial ask out there, and he's saying, "I know it might be a little pricey, but could you help me out?" And he just lays all of this before Artaxerxes. And I love this. I'll go back and I'll read it again. It says this, "And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my requests." These are big asks. But here's why this works. Because number one, Nehemiah has been, again, whether it's been 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, I don't know probably not years, but I don't know how long it is between the moment the conviction is stirred to the moment that he goes and he approaches the king. I don't know how long it is, but I know that his vision was sustained through praying and planning. And I know that when that moment finally came and the opportunity was there, God had been preparing Artaxerxes' heart for Nehemiah's proposal, but Nehemiah had been preparing a plan so he didn't look like a fool when he went to the king. And I can't help but think, not only are we talking sustainability, wherever you are in the midst of pursuing or chasing after your vision, not only are we saying that praying and planning is a good way to sustain a dream, but I just think it's the godly way to pursue anything. See, let me walk this out just a little bit more, just for a second. If there's some of us that will pendulum swing and we'll just sort of camp out on the praying part. And we'll pray, "God, give me this opportunity. God, give me this thing. God, give me this thing. God, give me this thing. God, if you could, I could really use this. God, could you provide this? God, could you put me in this situation? God, I need this." And we'll just pray and we'll pray and we'll pray and we'll pray and we'll pray. And I think there are moments where God just looks at us and he says, "I'm in. Are you?" You just want me to, so let me get this straight. You just want me to do all the work. You're saying, God, I could just really, if it's possible, I would love to lose about 50 pounds this year. That's my big thing. I would love to lose the weight. And God's saying, okay, how can I be a help in this? Well, I don't know. Could it just be like a miracle where it just snap finger and it just happens? And I think God sometimes is like, you don't need to drink all those Mountain Dews. You could chill. God, I'm praying for healing in this relationship. I'm praying for it. God, would you please just help them to get their crap together so the relationship's better? God, could you just help me? God, I'm praying. And then God, I think sometimes, so you want me to just change your heart, but you don't know. You don't know. You're kind of a jerk. You don't know that, do you? And so we'll just pray without planning. And then the flip side is we'll plan without praying. And I think we do this a lot too, is we'll plan, we'll prepare. I've got this figured out, and I know where I'm going to go here, and I know how this is going to look. But we've never invited God into the plan. We've never invited God into the process. We've never asked for his favor. We've never asked for it. We've said, God, here's what I need. I need an investor. God, here's what I need this opportunity. And we've never actually said, God, will you help me? And so if you're trying to sustain a vision, prayer and planning is essential. It's going to keep the dream alive. But if you're just pursuing anything, period, prayer and planning is essential. So I love this. In Andy Stanley's book, Visioneering, which I've been kind of using as a little bit of a guide through this series, I love this. He kind of breaks it down for us, old Andy does. He says this. He gives some templates. He says, when you pray, consider praying for these things. And maybe you want to write this down, or maybe you could take a picture of the screen. But I think this is really good, just specific things to be praying for. When you pray for what needs to happen in order for your vision to find initial liftoff. I'll say it again. Pray for what needs to happen in order for your vision to find initial liftoff. So for Nehemiah, what was it? He needed the king to say yes. That was the biggest hurdle. That was the biggest barrier. And so that was something Nehemiah was praying about. Here's the second thing you could be praying for in this season of maybe waiting or in this season of pursuing. Pray for the people who have the power, the resources, or the influence to make your vision possible. So this is big. If you're going to try to start a business, okay? Most of us don't have the resources or the influence or the power that we maybe necessarily need to get that thing off the ground right out the gate. You need an investor. You need someone who has a little more experience or more clout or more notoriety or whatever it might be. And so pray for that person to come in your life. Again, for Nehemiah, that was the king. Nehemiah was the one who needed the king to say yes. But not only did he need the king to say yes, Nehemiah needed the king to give him safe passage. Nehemiah needed the king to give him resources. So he began praying for it. And then thirdly, pray for this. Pray that God would give you favor in their presence. That's what Nehemiah does. He's praying, God, would you allow me to have favor in the presence of my king? And he does. It doesn't really make sense other than God placed it in the king's heart. It doesn't make sense otherwise. Why would the king send his cupbearer, who he has trust built up in, this person he has a relationship with, why would he send him away to build a wall around a city that he doesn't really care about? It's because God placed this favor for Nehemiah in his heart. And so here's this then. Let's talk about planning. When you plan, there are specific things that you could do to plan, like this. Plan as though you had the resources. What would you do? So some of you are looking at me and you're saying, well, Ryan, but I don't have the resources. I understand that. Plan as though you do. It's called faith. Plan as though you have the resources for your business, your thing, your dream, your vision, your marriage to go from here to here. Plan as though you have that opportunity and that it's going to happen. It's called faith, okay? Here's the next thing. Assume that you have the time. What would you do first? What would you do second? What would you do third, fourth, fifth? And you're saying, but Ryan, I don't really have the time to do all those things right now. I understand that. It's called faith. Assume that there's coming a day where you will. Assume that there's coming a day where God's going to give that to you. And you'll be able to say on that day, man, I got a plan. I have a strategy. I know how I'm going to do this. Here it is. Boom, step one. Boom, step two. Boom, step three. And you've been inviting God into that the entire time. And then here's the third thing that you could be planning for. Plan as if you knew someone were going to come along and give you an opportunity to pursue your vision. Just plan as though it's going to happen. Now, I don't know what the timeline is for this. I don't know when it's going to happen for you. I don't know what it all looks like. I don't know what the time frame was between Nehemiah's here's what is and Nehemiah's here's what could be. I don't know how long it was before he confronted and talked to the king. I don't know, but I know that whether it was 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, however long it was, here's what I know, that his planning and his praying kept his dream alive, and it allowed the opportunity for the vision to take life. Here's why I know this. Look over in chapter 3 with me now, if you have a Bible, or you can just read it off the screen. Check this out. In chapter 3 now, it says this. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Imri, built next to them. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hassanah. I'm trying to get these names right. None of these are going to be in the children's dedication next week. So they laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Miramoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs. And next to him, Zadok, son of Bana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. So other than that last group, everybody's working really hard. And here's my point. Nehemiah, his planning doesn't end at this moment that he proposes it to the king. Here's what we find in Nehemiah 3 is it's like once everything's going, okay, we got the supplies. All right, that all worked out. The king came through. He wrote us the paperwork that we needed and gave us the resources that we needed. And he had the influence and he had the power to protect me on the journey to get back here. Now, let's start building. Here's the plan. And we can see in the it's just laid out so eloquently, so beautifully. Nehemiah says, and this is where you guys are going to be. So come over here. Here's your shovels. Here's your whatever. Here you go. All right, go. Do it. And then you guys over here. Here's what you're going to do. Here we go. You need a pickaxe. What do you need? Here you go, okay? And you guys, you got the priests over there. Here's your chainsaws because that's what a priest. I don't know why. And then he starts to just give everybody these directions. And here's what happens. Other than those lazy people at the end, here's what happens. The wall begins to grow, and a vision comes to fruition because there was praying and there was planning. See, I think this is important. Nehemiah, notice this. If you go back and you read the story, Nehemiah he never prays God, would you just miraculously help the wall to just happen? He doesn't pray for a miracle. Nehemiah, he prays for an opportunity. And he, through prayer and planning, steps into it. We talked about it last week. Courageously. So here's what I want to do with the rest of our time here this morning. Is I want to share with you just a little bit more of the conversation that we had last week. I'm not going to share the why as much, but I want to share with you some of the plan as we're walking through launching a second campus and in the fall of 2021. I want to share with you some of the plan of what that'll look like. And I think the biggest way for me to share this plan is to try to answer just 3 questions that keep coming up as individuals are connecting with me or connecting with different people on our leadership team. And so I'm going to do my best to try to answer these as sort of quickly as possible because I want you to know the plan. And I want you to know that there is a plan and that we've been praying and planning for quite some time. And so here's the first question that I've had thrown at me a few times is, well, Ryan, what will Sunday mornings look like at the new campus? And this is a good question. I think there are a lot of layers to this, but let me try to do my best to walk you through it. So essentially, I guess the best way to say this is we're using some terminology. We're using a phrase that we're calling scale of sameness. And so what this means is a 10 would be, man, this is like, we want this new campus to have an identical sameness as this campus. A 0 would be like, it is a completely autonomous, standalone thing, might as well be a different church. For us, we're trying to create this new campus with such a dynamic that it will be as close to a 10 as possible. So you're asking, Ryan, what would Sunday mornings look like? Here's my quick answer. You ready? This. It would look like this. Our children's ministry will use the exact same curriculum, the exact same studies across each campus on the same Sundays. Our student ministry will be doing the exact same thing, same curriculum. Our DD ministry will be doing the same thing. It will be the same happening in multiple places. It would actually go so far as this. Let me go even further. On Sunday morning, like the programming that happens in this room, it'll be a live band at the new campus, okay? It'll be the exact same songs happening here as will be happening at the other campus. The same videos will be taking place. The same sermon series, the same creative elements will serve communion and offering in the exact same place. We want to have the highest scale of sameness as possible because we are all in on it. We want it to be one church in multiple locations. Now, maybe the biggest question, though, that people have is, well, Ryan, what about the sermon? Because that's the kind of tricky part, right? There's only one of you, so are we going to have someone else go preach at the other campus? Are you going to the other campus? Someone else going to preach here? How's that going to look? And I'm going to try and answer this really, really quickly, but here's the idea behind that, and this is what we're moving forward with, is we want to create, this will be the only part that's just subtly a little bit different than this campus, is at the new campus, and God willing, a third campus or fourth campus, this will always be the trend, it's going to be video teaching. So it'll be a live stream of what's happening here, what we're calling the broadcast campus, will then broadcast to the other campus. It will be a live feed of the message. Now, here's what's so cool. In 2019, we live in a day and age where technology is crazy. It's crazy. And so you might be hearing this and you're saying, oh, see, that's not cool. Like, it's just going to be a video, so that I don't want to go. If it's not live, I don't want to go. Well, I have a buddy that attends a church, and he attended one of their satellite campuses, and he went there for 6 months before he realized that it wasn't a live teacher on stage. That's the world that we live in. That's what technology can do. Not only that, let me say this, for those of you that are so like up in arms about this, I just can't get into it. There's a good chance you're watching me on that screen right now. And so we're saying, why would we not just harness what technology has given us and just take it, and we can multiply what we do here on Sunday mornings. We could do it in different places. And this isn't because I have some weird thing where I want to be broadcast or our teaching team broadcast because the egos are so big. No, it's really just this. We want to be one church in multiple places. And we feel like the more continuity that we can continue to put forth, we feel like when we're casting vision, we feel like when we're giving teaching series, it just helps to not have to have all these different voices trying to communicate things. Let's just take what we do and let's just put it out there. And so everything's going to be live. It'll just be a broadcast of the message, and it'll be done excellently. So and there are other pros in that as well, but I don't have time for that. So let me share another big thing. Here's the other question the second question that people ask is, Ryan, what will the facility look like? Like, what's this new facility going to look like? And I think the biggest part of this question, the thing that we try to kind of navigate through with this is it going to be a permanent facility, meaning we're in it all week long, we have offices there, we have all that stuff, it's a permanent facility, or is it kind of, I've heard of churches doing this, where they'll rent some space in a school on Sundays, or they'll rent some space in a movie theater or something, and it's like a load in, load out type thing, a portable campus. Which one are we looking at? And here's the answer to that really quick. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. And you're saying, well, Ryan, this isn't much of a plan then. Touche. But here's the honest truth. We're still about 22 months out from this campus getting off the ground, right? And so we're in that sort of weird place where we can't sign a lease yet. We still got some time. We can't do that quite yet. We're still about a year out from that. And so we're in this place where we're just scouting stuff out. We're trying to find a place in that sort of Jackson, Massillon, Perry area that can catch as many of you guys as possible that are making that 20-minute drive. We're trying to find a perfect sweet spot over there. And so there are pros and cons to both. If it's portable or it's permanent, believe it or not, there are pros and cons to both of those things. I don't have time to get into it this morning, but here's what I'll say. Whether it's a permanent campus that we're in Monday through Sunday, and we squeak out every square inch of it for ministry space, or whether it's a high school that we load in on Sunday mornings and load out on Sunday afternoons, and we have a separate space for offices somewhere else, whichever dynamic that we use, it will be excellent. And it will feel like FCC. There will be no mistaking that. It will be church. So here's the third question then. And this is the one that, if I was honest, I kind of went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to get into it after last week, but I'm going to, because in some ways, I know we're all in this together and we're all chasing this vision together, but if Nehemiah, if his sort of, if the thing that was standing in the way of his vision coming to reality was the king, I understand that the thing that honestly is hindering this big vision that we have becoming a reality is whether or not you have buy-in. And so this is why I'm just going to get into this really quick. Just really quick. It's this question. Ryan, can you give me just a little bit more detail on the $750,000 that we're trying to raise? And so last week I put this in front of you guys. I said over the next 2 years, in order to get this campus off the ground, we need to raise $750,000. To some of you, that was an astronomical amount. To some of you, that wasn't anything compared to other campaigns you've been in the past. And what I shared last week is that essentially breaks down to about $50 on average per family that gives regularly at our church over the next 2 years. $50 a month is what we'd be asking you to give above and beyond your regular tithes and offerings. Now, I know not everyone can do that. Some can't. That's just not possible. You can do $5, you can't do $50. I think God will bless that. Some of you can do $100. Some of you can do $200. Some of you can do $1,000 a month. I think God will bless that. But on average, that's what it breaks down to. It's about $50 above and beyond whatever you give regular tithes and offerings. And so let me be very clear, if this is my one shot of really casting this vision. Here's how this $750,000 will break down. We'll throw a slide up here. It's not an exact line down the middle, but it's close enough. It's like a 53-47 split. We're taking that $750,000 and $400,000 of it will go towards the first year operations of this campus. Here's what that means. That means this new campus, for the first year of its existence, will technically not have any expenses. We will still take up tithes and offerings. I'll explain that in just a second at that campus. But we just wanted to give that campus as much help as just go, do it, just go. No pressure, just go. And our hope and our prayer is that after the first year, that it will be completely self-sustaining and that it will never be a weight or a drain on this campus where we're having to fund it or any of that, okay? And so $400,000 goes to first-year operations for this new campus, and then $350,000 will go towards startup costs. Startup costs, let me break that down a little bit more. Here's what that means. First-year operations is stuff like this: payroll, rent for the new facility, ministry costs. Those are just the normal sort of, that's just operations, period. On the other side, those startup costs, that $350,000 is stuff like equipment, sound equipment, audiovisual equipment, stuff, just environments. We have to create children's ministry environments. We have to create student ministry environments. We have to create disability ministry environments, all of that from scratch, right? And so that there's some upfront money there. This is supplies. This is us getting ourselves to a place where we can just kind of jump right in with all of that. And so we believe $350,000 is enough to get a new campus from scratch, all of those startup costs. But then let me break down that $400,000 just a little bit more so you have total clarity on this. Here's how it breaks down. Go to the next slide if you would, guys. Here's how it breaks down. And this is how we're trying to create the operations budget just completely in the future when it comes to our new campuses is we want it to be made up of a 40-30-20-10 model. 40% of what comes in operationally, just general fund budget, is just staff, that's payroll. So specifically at our new campus, there will be a full-time campus pastor. That's not a preacher, but that's a campus pastor. That's the guy who's doing the pastoral work, that's leading the staff at that campus. Basically, a lot of what I do minus the teaching and preaching. So not only will we have a campus pastor, we'll also have a part-time admin, a part-time children's person, part-time student person, part-time worship person, and a part-time tech person. Then we'll also have a disability ministry person in there working with the staff as well. And then beyond that, though, 30% of our first-year operation and just operation from there on out will go towards rent. It's how we always would love for it to break down. 20% will go towards ministry expenses. That's children's ministry budget, student ministry budget, all the different budgets that make up the life of a church. And then 10%, this is something that we live by certainly now, is 10% of everything that comes in goes right back out to bless our community and to bless our world. And so here's what all that means. And I want to say this too. If you're looking at that and you're saying, oh, see, that's the problem with churches these days is they put all their money in the staff, they put all their money in the building, and only 20% for ministry. Just, I don't love that idea if you're thinking that. And here's why. Because the staff is also their ministry. And so the staff are the people that when you have a marital issue at 11 o'clock at night and you're desperate for someone to talk to, the staff are the people that you talk to. And they're available because of that. Same with rent. We are very intentional to squeeze out every square inch of this place for ministry expenses. And so we do. And so this is ministry happens here every single day. So we have this for ministry. And so don't view it that way. But for us, this is how we want to build it. And so this is the cool thing. This is what I was going to say earlier, and I'll kind of start wrapping up. This is the cool thing. If we're able to raise $750,000 over these next 2 years, and I believe we will, I am courageously putting this in front of you and asking you to courageously take a step of faith with me. But if we're able to raise this, and if we're able to, for that first year, it's already paid for. Everything is paid for this new campus. Here's what that means. As our new campus will take up tithes and offerings for that entire first year, and they'll there's people are being generous and they're growing in their generosity. Here's what we would love to do is we'd love to take all of that money that comes in through the tithes and offerings and create a fund that's a campus expansion fund. So we're putting all of that money aside into a campus expansion fund so that then when we're ready to start a third campus, Lord willing, or a fourth campus, it just snowballs. We already have the money and we don't have to do any more campaigns or fundraisers because to be quite honest, I don't love seeing the people walk out right now as I'm talking about money. But we know that this just continues to be, it'll just be this snowball effect where we can create more campuses, more opportunities to reach people far from Jesus. But here's the catch. We gotta start with that $750,000. So again, I'm just asking you. I don't know what you're able to do, if anything. And some of you are able to do a lot. I'm asking you to just courageously take a step of faith. I want to close with this. This is a quote from a guy named Mark Batterson. He's an author and a pastor out in Washington, D.C., and he said this. I stumbled across this a couple months ago, and it's just so powerful. I wanted to share it with you guys today as we close out. He said this. He said, your dreams will never exceed your imagination. You can't achieve what you don't believe. So idea generation is important. But idea execution is where rubber meets the road. He says, I like thinkers, they make me think, and I applaud their ability to plot, but I love doers even more. They inspire me to action, and it's the plotters, not the plotters, who make things happen. And then he said this, and this just got me in the gut. He said, God isn't going to say, well-planned, good and faithful servant. He won't say, well thought, well said, or well strategized either. There's one commendation, well done, good and faithful servant. I don't know your story. I don't know your vision. I don't know what God is calling you into. But I know too many of us, we let it die. And here's what's not going to happen. I don't think God would do this to us in the afterlife. I don't think this would happen where God would say, hey, just for a second, let me show you, here's a video of what your life could have been if you pursued these dreams. I don't think that would be nice. I don't think God would do that. But just for a second, imagine, God, there's coming a day when all of this will be done and we will be in eternity with God. And he's not going to look at you and he's not going to say, hey, good job on those ideas. He's not going to look at you and say, hey, remember that strategy that you had? I know, you never did anything with it, but it was cool. God's not going to do that. There's not here's what, he's going to look at you and he's going to say, well done. Good job. You did it. And so in your life, your vision, your dream that you're chasing after, do it. Be courageous. I know it might not be a snap of the fingers, but if you need the sustaining power right now, if you got to graduate first, if you got to pay stuff off first, whatever that is, pray and plan. Sustain that vision. But here's what I'm going to ask you guys. Next week, we want you to bring those pledge cards back. If you don't have one or if you lost it, there's some on the tables out on your way out in the lobby. But here's what we're going to ask is, would you just consider being a part of this vision that our church is walking into and being a part of the plan so that someday, if this is how it goes down, you'll be in heaven and God will say, hey, remember that time FCC did this big vision? They were trying to reach 1,201 people in 5 years and they're trying to launch that new campus, and you had that moment where you thought, you know what? It'd be a good idea if I helped fund that, or I helped to give a little bit towards that. That'd be a good idea. Remember how you didn't? Man, you don't want to do that. So I'm just asking you to consider taking a step of courage with me. And let's see how God works. Because although it's not the most exciting read in Nehemiah 3, as this guy's building this part of the wall and this guy, it's kind of cool to see it come to life. And God's going to work and he's going to bring this vision to life in our church, and I hope that you'll be a part. And so next week, here's what I'll promise you. I'm not going to talk about money. Next week, we're just going to celebrate. And next week, we're going to talk about what happens when we hit those moments of struggle and hardship in chasing a vision. But here's what I'll promise you is that in the midst of all that, we're just going to celebrate and know that even when those times come, God is faithful and he is working. Amen? Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this group. Thank you for our church. We love you. God, thank you for this vision that you're putting on our heart. God, I pray specifically for each heart here that we would chase after what you have for us individually and what you have for us as a church. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.